Hi there, welcome to another episode of DefenderKev's workshop. Today we're going to start the process of replacing the motor on the lathe. I was hoping to just run it on a variable frequency drive, or VFD, which converts single phase to three-phase power, because I don't have three-phase on the house. But unfortunately, according to my research, you can't run a two-speed three-phase motor on a VFD, which is what the motor for the lathe currently is. So what I'm going to have to do is get a single speed three-phase motor and a VFD, and then using hopefully the original switches and buttons and so on and the wiring, wire it up so that the high-low speed switch on the lathe will switch between two different frequencies on the drive. One will be 50 Hertz full speed, and switching it to 25 Hertz should give me half speed, or the equivalent of the low speed on the current motor. We'll talk a bit more about the wiring and the VFDs in the next episode. This episode is primarily going to be about getting the motor off and then fitting the new one. So without further ado, let's go take the motor off. When I finally got the lid off the junction box, it turns out that it had the original installation guide in there, which was printed in 1968. And here's our motor. It is a Brook Motors of Huddersfield. It is, well, it looks like it was made in 1957. There's a 1957 on the plate here. Basically, all we need to know is it's a two horsepower motor and it runs at 2800 RPM. What we've got now is this. It is a Tech. I believe it's 1.5 horsepower, three-phase, and in Delta configuration it'll run up to 3,500 RPM, so plenty for our requirements. I've got the equivalent pulley for this one, and the old shaft is longer, but the pulley had this big bump on the front. I don't know if there's a technical name for it, but basically when you line these up together, where this pulley is the same distance from the front of the motor as this one is. So the only thing we now need to do is to make up some adapters. This is the mount plate, so the motor mounts to this and then this mounts to the lathe. So we need to make some adapters where they will screw into the base plate in the same holes as the old motor, but then the new motor, the feet on the new motor, will attach to the top of the adapters. So let's go and do some CAD and some 3D printing. Once we're happy with them, we can then go over to the milling machine and make them up in aluminium. First thing to do is figure out the measurements. So we'll 3D scan the plate, and we'll 3D scan the original motor to take some measurements from it. Then we will mock up the motor mounts. So the first version we'll do will fit to the original feet that are on the motor. And then once we've designed them, we can 3D print them. Now, here's version 1. They look great, they are great. However, when you fit them to the mounting plate, you line the holes up. The mounts, especially at the bottom, are too close to the holes that we then bolt the motor plate to the lathe on. So, we're going to need to do something different. Back to drawing board version 2. This time we will remove the feet from the motor. We will design the mounts to incorporate those top holes from the original feet so that the new mounts will bolt directly onto the motor, which will give us some more space for the mounting holes to bolt to the motor plate. And here's version 2. These are great. They line up with the holes, and the motor will bolt quite happily here. The issue with these ones is that they are just over 50 millimeters tall. And when I went to go buy the bar stock to make them from on the milling machine, turns out that just over 50 is significantly more than 50 mil square. So what I did was I shortened them a little bit because I realized the way the motor mounts, that height difference is actually a sideways difference. So it's really not going to make that much difference, which comes on to version 3. Pretty much the same. You'll see that the mounts are ever so slightly shorter. So the top bit is inside that 50 millimeter restriction. I'm very happy with those. So now we need to cut some stock. We'll take that onto the milling machine and square it up.
And then we scribe the basic plan onto the block. Apologies for the autofocus fail.
Then I learned some important lessons about climb milling and depth of cuts. So once we've had that happen a couple of times,
took a step back and decided what probably would have been a better idea was to hog out as much as I can by drilling in the pocket. Then we can take a big end mill and it's a lot easier to get rid of all that material. So this is probably what I should have done in the first place, but you know, it's a learning curve. So once we've got all that out, we'll have a nice little pocket that we can clean up.
So we've milled out the pocket. There are a few marks. We'll be able to get rid of most of those, and they're cosmetic, so I think it should be fine. But we've now covered the whole thing in, as it turns out, the wrong kind of engineer's blue. This is the transfer stuff that doesn't dry, which is why I've got gloves on. And I've scribed all the marks for where we need to basically hog off material. And they're really big. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut those out on the bandsaw.
I did the rest of the cuts off camera, but here's our roughed out motor mount.
And we come up with the final 2 mounts, which are here. Ta-da! So we have 2 aluminium mounts. So now let's mount those onto the mounting plate and mount the motor on top.
Here's the motor, finally mounted on the mounting plate. Looks very good. And then we just put everything back together. It's just a few nuts and bolts. And here's the final result. We've got the belt back on, motor's in place, all the plates are back, looking very solid.
And there we have it, one shiny new motor installed and ready for wiring. Now, if you've made it this far, thank you very much for watching. If you like this sort of stuff, then please consider a like and a subscribe. And I will leave you with one question, which I would like your thoughts on down in the comments. Should I repaint the lathe, the original colour? I found a place that does the paint, and make it look shiny and new, or should I leave it as is with the patina, which tells the story of a long and fruitful life as a lathe? Let me know what you think, and again, thank you, and see you for the wiring next time.